What if imagination's not just an ability or something we do, but actually a realm of being? This is the 10th video in my series on making a mythology for our time. Let's talk a bit about imagination, because in many traditions around the world, imagination isn't just something human beings do. In fact, it's often depicted in folklore and occasionally in fiction, including my own, as its own world, its own realm that goes by names in the past, like the Eighth Climb, the Interworld, Hercalia, the World of Images, and other names too, depending on place and time. In my fiction, including my Lamplighter trilogy, I played with the idea of imagination as a realm called the Dream Veil. So there's 4 realms. There is Source, who the Hermetics would have called Big Mind. Some people say God. Source generates or births or emanates the next realm, the infra realm, the world of ideal types, archetypes. It's kind of abstract, although I do have a story that's partially set in the infra realm. Then comes the dream veil, which emanates from it, the world of imagination, and then our realm, the material realm. And so every fantasy, every fiction, every story, everything that the imagination ever did can be found in the dream veil. And there's a kind of ecology of the dream veil where different fantasy worlds have their own places. I call them veils. So there's Veil Middle Earth, Veil 24th Century, Veil 221B Baker Street. Lots of different veils. And dream veilers, fictional characters, fantasy characters, dream characters, can't just wander around the whole dream veil because it would mix everything up. So they have to stay in their veils. But when a mortal consciousness appears on the scene, and there are different ways to access the dream veil, then they can interact with each other and talk to each other. And there's even a special place in the dream veil called Interveil where that routinely happens. One of my stories is actually set in Interveil. I thought, wouldn't it be fun to have, let's say, Mitochondrial Eve and Mark Twain and Margaret Fuller and others who are actual historical figures, Carl Jung, interact in the dream veil with fictional characters? Wouldn't that be fun? So I wrote that, and I think one of the things you have to be careful of when you mix and match like that is that there needs to be a reason that really feeds and drives the story. I forget, crossovers I think is actually the name in fiction where you have, let's say, superheroes from one series mingle with superheroes from another, and the result often turns out kind of indifferent or even silly. It has to drive the story. So there are solid reasons why these particular characters interact with each other. So let me give you a couple of examples. In my second novel, the protagonist is a middle-aged professor named Simeon who unexpectedly walks into a much more psychedelic and, phantasmagorical world, reality than he realizes. And he's got to adapt to it. And meanwhile, somebody's trying to kill him. And he doesn't know why. So at one point in the story, he discovers the dream veil. He has access to it. There's different ways of doing that. All creatives know how instinctively, but there are also other fictional and technological ways to get there in my fiction. So Simeon is stuck with a real puzzle, and he visits 221B Baker Street to have a consultation with Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, and they put him on the right track. It's in some ways a life-changing conversation. That was a lot of fun to write. When I write about historical and fictional characters, I do homework so I can get their mannerisms right, the way they speak, the way they think and feel, things like that. There's another scene where he talks to Bellum, who is the archetype of war. So in the dream veil, these archetypal characters that span cultures show up as characters. So he finds himself in Scotland in 1314 on the eve of the Battle of Bannockburn, because he's trying to understand how to protect himself in a way that's not violent. And so the dream veil transports him there. And he has a talk with Bellum, the war god there. And Bellum, when he speaks, sounds fierce. All the powers, there's 30 of them, these archetypal powers, they all have characteristic ways of coming across. So Aloeri, who's kind of like Venus, Aphrodite, goddesses like that, she has a very easeful and friendly and open and kind of seductive way of talking. Bellum's just the opposite, and they often hang out together too, by the way. So when Simeon finds Bellum, he goes, I want to talk to you about the nonviolent warrior in a situation I'm facing. And Bellum says, go. And so he's dressed as a Scottish warrior because that's Simeon's ancestry. He's a piper because he plays the bagpipes. And he says, okay, so someone's trying to kill me. And Bellum says, more detail. He goes, okay, well, my father was involved in some secret experiments, and he starts spinning it out. And Bellum goes, not that much. So they work out a situation where, again, Simeon gets an important puzzle piece. So I wanted to show how we can interact with the dream veil, with the world of imagination, and take on some of these characters and be challenged by them. And I think that's something that belongs in a worldview or mythology for our time.